I'm Mayor Jen Grigoraitis, and welcome to the Melrose Minute, where we bring you news you can use from City Hall. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by Health and Human Services Director Anthony Chui. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you.
So your department has a lot of responsibilities, and one that we're going to talk about today that gets a lot of questions is animal control. So anything you want to say broadly about that before we dive into specific topics?
Sure. So one of the favorite parts of the job is working with the public on wildlife and other questions about animals. Many of our residents have many questions about animals and wildlife, and so we're here to provide as much information as possible and to create an environment where it's safe for both us and wildlife.
Great. So let's start with non-wildlife, cats and dogs. So I have a dog registered with the health department and the clerk's office, of course. Anything that we want to tell folks about how the health department can help them and what they need to do?
Yes, so with dogs, we ask that everybody register a dog after 6 months. It's a way for us to keep track of their immunizations. We're then able to verify their rabies record as well. And when there's an unfortunate incident of a bite, we're able to get that information in a timely manner to those who need it. For those who don't know, rabies is quite uncommon, but it is something that we take very seriously. And so the more that we can get dogs registered, the better our information is.
Okay, great. And that's just an application that folks can fill out through the clerk's office, right?
That's correct.
Super easy. All right, moving on to some of the wildlife that we see in Melrose, coyotes.
Yes.
What should folks do if they see a coyote, and what should they not do?
Yeah, so coyotes are, they're not necessarily nocturnal, and so that's one of the common myths that we have. They like to travel generally dawn to dusk, but their day sightings are actually when they're looking for food. And so you can kind of see them at all hours of day. When they're out in the day, they're not necessarily infected with rabies, they're not necessarily diseased. There are sightings recently of coyotes that are very thin, very scrawny. They may have patches of hair missing. And so coyotes generally are very resourceful, and so they'll travel in packs. And we appreciate all the information that is given to us, and so we actually work very closely with the Massachusetts Environmental Police, as well as our wildlife rehabilitators in our area. And so when we work with them, we give them information if there is a diseased coyote or other wildlife in our area. But generally, coyotes are actually not confrontational. They will generally run when approached. And so the advice that we give is to make yourself very large, whether that's having a jacket, waving your arms, making loud noises. And the one thing we say is don't run. When you approach the coyote, coyotes will turn and run because they're not confrontational. But the best advice is to make yourself look bigger than you are.
Oh, great. And you brought up a great point that I wanted to talk a little bit more about, which is that you mentioned the environmental police. And so actually, wildlife, which is a pretty broad category in Massachusetts, is very heavily regulated at the state level. So there's actually a lot of things that you, as the health director, cannot do because of state law. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So myself, and by extension our staff in the animal control officer position, we work very predominantly with domestic animals. And so we work very closely with dogs and cats and other pets. But we actually do not have the license to work mostly with wildlife. In emergency situations, we will assist environmental police and other wildlife rehabilitators. But in general, because of all the laws that protect wildlife, we actually don't intervene in most cases. On private property, we generally advise that if there is wildlife around, they can hire a pest control company, or wildlife tends to move on. So we will give the advice that if people are able to get rid of sheltering spots, and so most wildlife, coyotes, foxes, and skunks and raccoons, they look for food and look for shelter. And so everybody can do their part in helping to keep them in the areas such as the Fells Way Reservation, the areas around Elm Pond, and the areas around Pine Banks, is to keep them out of the yards by getting rid of cover and getting rid of food sources. Okay,
good to know. And so if somebody does see a skunk, a coyote, a raccoon in their yard, there's nothing we can do, the police or the health department, to remove that animal. That's a request to a certified wildlife agent.
That is correct. Certified, there are actually problem animal control officers, and those are special designations for folks that go through that process. That information is available on the mass.gov website when you look for problem animal control officers, and those can be contacted there as well.
Okay, great. Let's talk about what's probably everyone's least favorite topic, rodents. So both mice and unfortunately rats. What should folks be doing, and what can the health department do if rodents have been seen somewhere in the city?
So rodents are one of our favorite topics every year. Seasonally, we see an increase in complaints, generally in the spring and summer and lasting into the early winter when everybody's outside. And so one of the biggest things that we talk about is food source. And in my 3 years here, in the beginning, we received a lot of complaints, and we would put them on a map, and we would see that they centered around dumpsters, places with non-compliant trash disposal. And so over time, what we do is we work with businesses and work with residents to meet the requirements for trash disposal. That's keeping a cover on trash, having it disposed in a timely manner, cleaning the area around trash disposal. And that actually creates a less friendly environment for rats. And so then they move on. And over the years, we've actually kept track of these complaints in their general area where they're coming from. And we see that rodents tend to migrate from year to year, and they're generally looking for shelter and food. And so what residents can do is if they do see conditions that might lead to rodent harborage, that could be garbage disposal issues, that could be burrows forming in areas that are less frequented by people, they can report it to us, and so we can conduct an investigation. With that information, we're able to reach out to the property owner and then have that resolved, whether that's rodent mitigation plans. That could also be physical removal of conditions that are hospitable to rodents, as well as education for those people as well.
Great. So if someone calls and identifies a potential location, we are able to go out and try to put some measures in place with that property owner.
Yes, absolutely. And we aim to educate first. That's one of our mottos, is that we want to make sure that everybody has the same information to work with.
Great. And what happens with construction and renovations? If folks are doing work on their house or there's a new property going in, I know there can be a belief that construction causes rodents to be disturbed and then they kind of move out. So what does the city do for those situations?
Yeah. So with construction and demolition, there's mixed results and mixed evidence when it comes to whether that actually causes rodent increases. There's been studies done by people far smarter than myself. But there is sometimes an uptick in that area. And so what we do require is that when they go for their building permit or their demolition permit, they actually are required to submit a pest control invoice from a licensed pest controller. And so that pest control company will come out and they will set traps, and they'll evaluate the area for conditions that might lead to rodents affecting the surrounding areas. And so we will go out to verify that they're doing this. And with the licensed pest controller, they are very diligent in keeping these up. So they'll refill the traps, they'll make sure to take out rodents that are found there, and maintain the area so that it will not affect the residents.
Great. So this is a requirement for everyone, whether you're redoing your porch or building a brand new development, that there be a rodent mitigation plan on file.
That's correct. In most cases, when there is any groundbreaking, and the building department permit has specific conditions what qualifies for needing a permit, but for any of those that might require groundbreaking or major renovation, a rodent plan is required.
Okay, great. Moving on to it, another favorite topic is the geese of Melrose. So we have beautiful L Pond, which I think is a welcome area for them to visit, and they are everywhere in our fields and let us know that by leaving something behind. Yes. So can you talk about geese, which are protected wildlife, and what the city does to try to mitigate them?
Yes, so I'm glad you mentioned that. Geese are, just like all the other wildlife, protected. They too tend to go to areas where there's open fields. They like the pond where there's clear sight lines, and so that's more for their safety. They're able to survey the area. One of the things that we talk about is deterrence, and so we actually work with the USDA. We have a contract with them. They come out and they actually provide goose mitigation methods. And so we can be better partners about that. What we will be doing moving forward is providing measures to disturb the geese area so they're not too comfortable in that area, and so they might move on. But geese, just like all of our wildlife, are endemic to our area. And so it's actually a healthy sign to see wildlife around, meaning that our area hasn't been deforested to a point where wildlife is no longer around. And so we have coexisted with them for many years, and we will continue to safely find a way to have them move on to a different area, but not hurt them as well.
Yep, they're just a part of life, and we'll do our best to have them not get too comfortable here. And it is a good reminder that they are protected under federal law. So lastly, animal rehab. When people think they've seen or have seen an injured animal, whether it's a dog or wildlife, who should they call and what can we do?
Absolutely. So when there's a suspicion that there might be a dog or a cat that is injured, that might belong to somebody, they can call both the animal control office line, which we have in our office, as well as the Melrose Police. And so they are also very well connected with us, and they can get that information to us in a timely manner. When there is suspicion of wildlife that might be injured, we actually provide the Massachusetts Environmental Police phone number, as well as some of our known wildlife rehabilitators in our area. And so they're able to provide a lot of help. In the case of injured animals, if they're not in a contained area, rehabilitators may not be able to easily capture them. So they may wait until they're in a backyard, maybe in a partially fenced area, before they will come out and pick up an animal. But generally, it'll take multiple tries. Animals are very resourceful, so they will move around. And so we do our best to help triangulate an area where they might be before we make that contact.
Okay, great. And who is doing animal control for the city these days?
So
Always get questions about that.
Absolutely. So we work with Brian Johnston. He is our animal control officer. He actually works for the Stoneham Police Department. We work very closely with him. He's able to respond. He has been doing this for over 10 years. He's very experienced, and he's seen many, many cases. And so he brings a wealth of knowledge. And for us in our department, we're able to handle some of the less urgent calls. And so in our time here, we've come across dogs that get off leash. We come across cats that have just found their way out of the house. So we do our best to try and help with those situations. And we do have an animal control officer who is very, very helpful.
Great, and we're very grateful to have him on our team. You mentioned dogs getting off leash. I do want to remind folks that we do have leash laws in areas where dogs are not allowed. Anything that you want to add for residents that are watching about how to be a good neighbor and a good resident?
Absolutely. There is a reason why we have the leash law. It's both for the protection of others, but also protection for the dog themselves, the owner. Dogs are sometimes a target if they're able to get off leash for wildlife. And so we want everybody to be able to keep their dog under control. We've received a couple of calls about people having their dogs off leash in public areas like cemeteries and other places, in parks. And so for everyone's safety, we would like everybody to try to abide by that. And so we will put out more educational materials moving forward, but keeping your dog on a leash is very important, both for your safety as well as others.
Okay, great. Thanks. Anything else you want to share as it relates to the wildlife of Melrose?
I will say the people of Melrose are great about wildlife, and many of them are passionate about protecting the wildlife in our area. We are very lucky to have such great greenery around us. We have the Middlesex, we have the Fells Way, we have Pine Banks, we have all these other areas that are close to nature and Elk Pond. So we're very lucky to have all these natural resources, and we've coexisted with wildlife for a long time. So I see that we can be great partners in that.
Great. Thank you for being here and sharing all this information. I think it's really helpful for folks to know what they can do when they see a situation and they want to provide some assistance. So thank you to you and your team for all that you do.
Great. Thank you.